Good evening. My name is Joel Selvin. Thank you. I'm here tonight to conduct the interview with the author of Going Sane in San Francisco. Would you please welcome Roger Silver.
Thank you.
Roger, welcome to the Throckmorton. This is your life.
Is this working?
Can
you guys hear this?
So, Roger, they're probably, as unlikely as it may seem, people might actually not know what Beach Blanket Babylon is. Start us off here tonight and tell us about Beach Blanket Babylon, what it is, and how your brother Steve Silver came to create it.
Well, my brother was very creative, and he was always doing skits when we were growing up. And my father would take us to the Broadway shows at the Curran, and he would be listening to Broadway shows all day long and painting. He was a painter. I listened to the 45s. And it evolved to the point where he went to college and he started putting on these campy affairs. And then those campy affairs at San Jose State, he got everybody together. He was in this jock fraternity, this puny little guy, and they were all rallying around him. And so he put on these shows at San Jose. It graduated to Rent a Freak on Union Street, and they passed a hat, and they'd have everybody dressed up. He'd make $300 or $400 a night. And then he told my father, I have this idea for this show. And he was writing the show, and they were looking for a theater. And my mother calls me and says, well, we got this theater, and your dad doesn't like it. It was the Olympus on Columbus. And they want $20 grand a month, but your father won't do it. And I go, what's up, Dad? And he said, well, I'm not going to pay 20 grand a month. I'm going to find him a better place. And he found Club Fugazi, $5 grand a month. And it worked out. They haven't left since. So then Beach Blanket Babylon started.
Well, tell us about the show. I mean, like I say, maybe nobody has been here, you know. It's hard to imagine, but
Well, I haven't seen the show in 20 years, so, but it's a parody. It's a parody on current events and music, pop music, old rock and roll or whatever. It's a formula. A monkey could do it now. You just plug it in. All you do, you read the paper, get a song, get a costume. And it's been going for like 45 years without an empty seat.
Amazing.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. It is pretty crazy.
Tell us about your relationship with your brother.
I always loved my brother. And we were, I'd go out and I was a ball player and he was a painter. And on Sundays, he'd paint, I'd go out and play ball. He got breakfast in bed till he was 42. I had to clean the house before I'd go out and play ball, So, he got all the attention. I had to burn the house down to get any. I came close, but I never burned the house down. But mine burned down a couple of years ago. So, everything was cool with my brother, and then I didn't know he had AIDS. I found out from somebody he had AIDS, and I'm writing to him, and I don't care if you got AIDS. I used to ask him, are you gay? And he goes, no, I'm not gay. I go, listen, I don't care if you are or not. This is San Francisco. I love you. This is, it's not a big deal here. Not an issue. If you're in Selma, Alabama, it's an issue. So I wrote him a letter saying, I heard you got AIDS. I want to come and see you. I hadn't seen him in 2 years because, I don't know, this stuff, a lot of this is in the book.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're trying to introduce the topic. And
Okay. Well, he called me up one day and he said, Dad's got to move. They're living at the Palace of Fine Arts, right in front of the Palace of Fine Arts. My father, my mother, and my brother. And he calls me up and says, Dad's got to move. I go, What do you mean? You're living in his house. Oh, well, I got Mom a holistic doctor. To the people I know here, I'm sure you've heard this story. But I go, well, you're going to have to find another doctor. This is your father's house. You're living in it. And the battle lines were always drawn growing up with my mother and my father, my brother and my mother, and me and my dad. But I left the house early, so it was my dad was in with them. I was just gone all the time. And so I told Steve, I said, I'm going on the road. I was on the road 2 weeks a month with Journey and come home. When I come back, we'll get him a doctor. So 2 weeks later, I come back, the phone rings. It's my dad. Hey, Dad, where are you? He goes, I'm at the Holland Motel on Lombard Street. Your mother and brother threw me out of the house. I mean, what is that? So I said, I'm living in Fairfax. I'm coming to get you. I went to it's the last hotel on Lombard before you get to the bridge approach, a flea house. So I went and picked him up, and his back was bleeding from the springs coming through the mattress. And he was like 80 years old. So I picked him up and took him home, and he stayed for a couple of months. My wife and I took the spare room, and we gave him our room. What a lovely guy this guy was. I mean, he was the salt of the earth. This guy, wherever he is, you know. And 2 months later, he went home because the doctor got busted for fraud. My father was always right, always. And I wouldn't talk to my brother because I thought that was that was even worse than shitty to do to your own parent, especially someone that's always been there for you. And then I heard he had AIDS. I wrote him a letter. And I got a phone call from this woman. She says, hi, I'm your new sister-in-law. Your brother and I got married on Pearl Harbor Day. There's another bomb, right? And so your brother loves you and he wants to see you. I go, oh, good, I'm going to come by. She goes, oh, wait a minute. I'll tell you when to come by. 3 weeks later, I got the call. You can come by now. So I walked into this opulent apartment that he had bought on 1750 Taylor Street, and everything that came down the pike in my family was up on the walls. It was on a dresser. It was a couch, this or that. And I walked in, I'm looking at all this stuff. I guess he had to have everything. So while I'm waiting for him, the maid comes out and she says, oh, Steve will be out in a minute. I hadn't seen him in 2 years. And I hear, I'll be right out. A little weaker voice than that. And 10 minutes later, he came out and pushing an IV pole. I didn't recognize him. I gave him a hug. I put my arms around him, and all I could feel were bones. I'll be right back. I had to go to the bathroom. I vomited. It was very heavy for me. And then I wasn't allowed to see him anymore. For one reason, for whatever reason, it's in the book, but I was calling him, how come you're not seeing me anymore, this and that, and one of his assistants says, you're not going to see him. Shit. So I never saw him again alive, but I got a phone call one night from the sister-in-law saying, I wanted you to be the first to know your brother just died. And I went over there, and I was living in Sausalito, 15 minutes from his house, and I went over there, and there was like 25 people having cocktails in the living room. I go, the first to know? Yeah. And I walked in this bedroom, and he had this beautiful, stately bed with a canopy, and he's dead. And that was pretty heavy. So, but it was what was really heavy was I wasn't allowed to see my own brother before he died. I called, my brother even called me, how come you're not coming and seeing me anymore? And Charlotte Maillard Schultz, the before Schultz had the after party. It's not an after party, but after the funeral, at her apartment at 900 Green, and there was 500 people. I had friends there. You know, you could tell my friends were different than anyone else. You know, Herbie Herbert, if you're here, you know what I'm talking about. And my brother had this maid who took care of my father and my mother both before they died, and she took care of Steve. And she rushes me at this penthouse, and there's 500 people here. She goes, "Where were you when your brother died?" You're his only brother. There was 8 people around his bed when you died. How could you not have been there? You know? Heavy. I knew at that very moment I was going to write a book. I had to write a book, you know. And I went on the voyage, or the journey, to write this book. It took me like 12 years, you know.
Let's get back to that. But Jo Schumann, your sister-in-law.
Oh, is that her name?
Interesting character. Of course, she was raised with her cousin, Clive Davis.
Yes.
They grew up in the same house together after
Right.
Clive's parents
That's her best
died.
buddy.
They're tied together, and
Yeah.
so she's a very. How did she enter the picture? Where did she come from? How did she meet your brother?
She was a patron of my brother. Her and her husband, Adolf Schumann. You know, he had some society people were just enthralled with my brother and his show. And the first time I met her, there was a party, the 20th anniversary party, and it was I think it was 20th. It was on Green Street in front of Fugazi. He closed the street, and she came with Adolf. My brother introduced me. "Oh, my cousin's Clive Davis." First thing out of her mouth. Oh, okay. So I guess he died. He was 45 years older than her. He died, and next thing, my brother's with her, hanging with her, you know, and doing his bidding for him if he wants, you know. I was living on Baker Street. "Oh, why don't you move, Steve? You know, why don't you move? Steve loves you, but he wants you to move." And Steve had half the house, and my father had half the house. It should have been my father's. You know, he bought the house, but my mother left everything to my brother. And there was nothing left of anything else when my father died, because my brother ended up with everything. He had Alzheimer's, and I had a choice. Do I want to sue my family or write a book?
Let's talk about writing the book. 12 years.
12 years. Driving a cab from midnight until 6 in the morning. I have 3 kids. Taking them to and from school. Dad dropped me off down the corner. You know. I would take them to school, come home, cook dinner for them, coach them in sports, travel with them, help them with their homework, and do that. You know, I had joint custody with my wife, my ex-wife, and
She's an interesting person in the book.
she's a very interesting person. You know, we were together a long time. You know, it was tumultuous. Drugs were everywhere, alcohol. But basically, she's a good person, and she was a great mother to my kids. But, you know, everyone changes. We were all crazy then. What about you? Were you crazy then?
I had a job.
You had a wife. But my wife raised my kids, her part. She was really good, and she's a great mother. So what else could you ask for?
But the book continued to be on your mind and something that you were pressing forward
My
with.
first editor said you have to write an outline. It took me 9 months. That outline I've saved, it's now yellow. And then I went on this odyssey for this book, and I got a computer, and do you want to save this? I go, no, click. There went 150 pages. Never to return. But I had my outline.
That's called saving it to the big disc in the sky.
The big disc in the sky. But I did go back to this outline, and I probably wrote it better the next time. And then I had some poetry, and I said, I was writing poetry. So I put some poetry in there, and then I got songs, and I put some songs in there. And when it was all said and done, I wrote the screenplay, which I haven't pitched yet, and which could be a musical. So.
Scribble, 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 Roger.
Yeah, scribble. But I wasted a lot of time until I got really creative, just getting high for years, stoned, wasting my time. But maybe, some things come later on to people. This came later to me.
You can't really complain about timing.
No.
When it's ready, it's ready. But you also had a career of your own in the music business, songwriter.
I was a promotion man, and I wrote a song. Greg Raleigh was a very good friend of mine, and those were crazy days.
So you say.
So I say. And I used to play this song for him, and if we'd go to a bar, he'd play it on the piano. And then later on, Miles Schon called me up, and he goes, "Hey man, we just did one of your songs." I go, "Really? Which one?" He goes, "Anytime." I go, "I never wrote that song." He goes, "Oh yeah, you did. But there's 3 or 4 other guys on it." I got it my first royalty check was $67,000. I absolutely fell down. It took me a week to get up. Well,
I'm sorry, I missed. What's the song?
Anytime.
Anytime. That's on
Anytime.
Journey's Departure?
It's on 6 Journey records.
6 Journey records. Oh my.
So,
Yeah. Jack Nicholson told me that he thought songwriter was the best job in show business.
you get one song and trying to find another one to get done, and I don't sing. Hard. But I have a lot of songs, but some people will do them, maybe, I don't know. After the book is a screenplay, and I'm a painter, so I want to paint.
How's the book been received?
I've had, I've had nothing but 5-star reviews, except I got one-star review, or less than a 1-star review. And it just crapped all over the book. It was probably a plant, but I really enjoy having something like that as a contrast to all these other 5-star reviews.
It's important to upset people. If you're going to inspire people, you're going to upset some. It's very important. But what about the people you've written about? I mean, that book doesn't really spare the characters.
Well, nor do I spare myself.
You're the chief character.
I've changed the names from the drug people. And it was just, they took 80 pages out. I've had 3 editors. We don't, so I went with the flow. Let it streamline it. It's 367 pages now. I have the back page. The back of the book is, where are they now? Some of the characters. But it's a long process. It's painstaking, and I said, what the fuck am I doing so many times, But I stuck with it. I really stuck with it, and I'm happy with the book, Can't please everybody,
No.
Maybe I
I don't
can.
know anything about that. Well, how about you guys? Do you have any questions that you would like to ask Roger? Let me get out here. See.